And we can begin. So, very good afternoon here from all of us in Bangkok. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar entitled Under Attack, Academic Freedoms in Asia. This event is co-convened by our two principal partners, the Center for East and Southeast Asian Studies at Lund University, as well as Scholars at Risk. This event is also brought to you in association and in partnership with EFDEA, a regional civil society empowerment organization, as well as the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, with whom we work through at National Cheng Chi University. So once again, welcome. Before I get into the actual event, let me, as usual, share with you the webinar guidelines. You'll be placed upon entry on mute, and your video will be permanently disabled. We apologize in advance for that. That is all for internet stability. We encourage active, questions and comments, and you please send these through our chat boxes, and we will also, forward you relevant questions to the speakers that come through from our audience. Please also look out for our survey questions towards the end of the program to let us know where we can improve. And finally, look out for other updates from the Asia Center team through your chat box. So let me now introduce the program. Today we have a lineup of 6 speakers. To kick off, we have Bencharat Sechwa, who's sitting on my left here from Mahidol University, Thailand. We have Herlambang Wiratraman from Airlangga University, Indonesia. We have Mubashir Hassan from Western Sydney University in Australia. We have Charles Wu Chong Han from the National Cheng Chi University in Taiwan. And we have Professor Fu Hua Ling from the University of Hong Kong. And after the first 5 speakers have spoken, our discussant, Ms. Karin Zachary from Lund University, will try to pull together the views and perhaps give us a synthesis of the discussion. Thereafter, we will have a question and answer session for all of you to take part, and then we will wrap up the session and say our thank yous and bid goodbye. Next, I'd like to do a little promotion of upcoming events here at Asia Center. World Press Freedom Day is coming next month, so Asia Center is putting together a webinar on 4th of May at 2 p.m. Bangkok time. You can see the details in your chat box. We have our annual conference on COVID-19 in Asia that's happening 8 to 10 September, also in Bangkok. Details are in your chat box. Before I kick off the event, I'd like to introduce a poll, which basically reads, how do you rate academic freedom in your country? So please take a few minutes to respond to the poll. And as you are doing that, let me introduce today's session and provide the context. Yawi, if I may go on to the next slide, please. Yeah. So at the moment, you will see an index from the Academic Freedom Index, which has been put together by the Global Public Policy Institute as well as Scholars at Risk. You will see for East Asia, there are 3 countries, Mongolia, Taiwan, South Korea, fairly high up in the score. Not surprisingly, I suppose Japan is, touched down. And then Hong Kong, drastically low. And then we have China and North Korea. I'm sure our colleagues from East Asia who are on the panel will give us an insight into this. Next, we look at Southeast Asia is very, very scattered. Not very great. Even at the top, things are looking pretty weak. Indonesia is at, kind of just above the middle, and I'm sure our colleague today on the panel will give us some insights. Malaysia is below halfway, so is Myanmar, and so is Singapore, surprisingly, even though it ranks highly in global university ranking, and that's one of the issues that we will be unpacking today. And then right at the lower end, we have Cambodia, Vietnam, as well as Thailand, Laos. Now, Brunei was not in the list. And then we'll move on to South Asia, where we have Nepal right at the top, and everybody else is kind of hunkered in the middle. Bangladesh is way right at the bottom, with India just below the halfway mark. Now, what is interesting here is that in the issue of freedom of expression, there's a lot of discussion around press freedom, there's a lot of discussion about internet freedom, but the sibling academic freedom is usually not that much discussed. So if we line up, say the international scores for press freedom, media freedom, as well as academic freedom, you will see actually there is a correlation sometimes across the countries. For example, Bangladesh consistently, is at the bottom of the table when it comes to South Asia. And our colleague today, Dr. Mubashir Hassan, perhaps later you will give us some insight. So before I go on to invite the first speaker, let's see what are our poll results. So for answer one, good. Academics are free to express themselves without any repercussions, 40%. Not good. We have continued to have incidences where academics are attacked for their critical analysis, a touch under 40%. And then what academic freedom? Most people in the country are not even aware of the concept. So that's about 22%. So this is just a kind of a flavor. We had about, over 50 people, I think, or close to 50 people participating in this poll. So thank you very much. So without further ado, I would like to turn to Bencharat. Bencharat, you are here based in Thailand. A lot has been going on recently. Could you please, share with our participants out there in the virtual world, what's the latest and, what can we expect in terms of academic freedoms in Thailand? Over to you.
Thank you, James, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this very important issue. My focus today is on the academic freedom in a non-democratic context. And here I'm not talking only about the non-democratic rule or authoritarian regime where repression on any kind of freedom of expression is severe, like what we are seeing in Myanmar in the last 2 months. But I'm also talking about the society that does not have democratic culture and is not open to any discussion of different ideas or the ideas that may challenge the mainstream narratives in the society. Although my focus today is on the Thailand case, which is, not to my surprise, ranked at almost the bottom scale in the Academic Freedom Index in Southeast Asia that you just showed. I believe this situation that I'm going to discuss is what we are also experiencing in other countries as well, especially now that the conservative voices are rising and gain momentum in the society, especially in our Southeastern region context, Southeastern Asian region context. But before I go any further, I would like to emphasize the point that James raised up earlier, that in our discussion about academic freedom, we cannot separate it from the discussion about freedom of expression in the society at large. Academic freedom is not about the privilege of the academic to say things and should be seen as part of the society's freedom of speech and civil and political rights. Academic freedom would mean nothing if the society at large is not free and freedom of expression is repressed. Now let us have a look at the situation in Thailand, a country that has been ruled by military junta and its successive government in the last 7 years. Although the principle of academic freedom is recognized and guaranteed in many university regulations. I checked the regulation of most of the key universities in Thailand, and I found that they put a very strong term that academic personnel should work based on the principle of academic freedom. But every university also has another common provision that the university personnel must be, quote, and faithful to the democratic rule with the king as the head of the state, and not just democracy or democratic rule. This is a definition of democracy that is quite controversial in Thailand because it is often interpreted very narrowly in connection with the state ideology that put the monarchy at the highest position in the society, and it put allegiance to the king as the requirement for everyone. As many of you may already know, that any critical perspective on the monarchy in Thailand is illegal, and many people have been put in jail because they speak out. And although such a provision has not been used by the university's administration against any academics, it has been referred to in some university discussion as a warning to those academics who join the pro-democracy movement, which has been seen as anti-monarchy movement. And this is, I see it as part of the societal frame that set the scope of what is allowed to discuss in the society. And it is part of the attack on academic freedom on any issue related to democratic struggle. And such a societal control is obvious in a recent case that made headline in Thailand. A historian academic and a publisher that published his work is sued by a relative of the person he referred to in his PhD thesis for 50 million baht, or that's over 1.5 million US dollars. And this is not a personal grudge against someone who may say something that you don't like about your relative, but it is part and parcel of the Thai conservative force to suppress any critical discussion on the monarchy. The thesis in question is about the role of monarchy in Thai politics, especially during the Cold War. It is an issue that has been a taboo in the Thai society until very recently. And there is also a persisting attempt to revoke his PhD thesis, which was approved back in 2009 by the claim that he misrepresented the evidence on the role of the monarchy, of the king. The academic in question acknowledged his mistake, explaining that he misread the evidence and removed it from any subsequent publication of his work. However, that misreading of the evidence does not affect the central argument of his thesis. As a consequence of the attempt of the conservative force, earlier this year, the university set up a special committee to investigate whether he deliberately misused the evidence. This is 12 years after the thesis was approved and his PhD was awarded. And the investigation is still ongoing. So when a group of academics issue a statement against that university initiative to investigate the case, we were harassed individually by a royalist group who tried to urge the Ministry of Higher Education to use disciplinary action against us because we were deemed not loyal to the monarchy. Luckily, no action is taken by the ministry yet. And I say it is not yet because the ministry has been quite active in suppressing and controlling the academics who express their political opinions. Last year, when more than 300 academics around the country signed a statement in support of the student pro-democracy protest, many university administrations harassed their staff that signed the statement. The Minister of Education himself convened a meeting with university's president, telling them how to govern the students' activity and what should be taught to the student. So the case I just shared with you is not an isolated case, and it should be, again, as I keep emphasizing, that it should be seen in a larger context where freedom of thought, freedom of speech, including academic freedom, is shaped and limited. When academics express their political opinions or comments, we here in Thailand, we have to be ready for any repercussion, whether through the university control or through the society. And in such a politically divided and conservative society as in Thailand, the situation is getting worse and worse because not only academic freedom is being controlled by the regulation or intimidation by the state, but we are also being controlled by the conservative civil society who adopt the state ideology and who act out on behalf of the state. Do I still have some time?
Yes, certainly.
Just my last point is then what we can do. Of course, a part of the attempt to try to change the political system to be more democratic, I think, and apart from that attempt to try to enlarge public and political space, I think the academics would play a crucial role in trying to ensure that the undiscussable topics are discussable, and to ensure that democratic culture is strengthened and deepening into the society. I would end it here.
Yeah, thank you, Bencharat, for that, take, on how society itself can be a lever of censorship on academics. Now, I want to just, before I move on to the next speaker, ask you a transition question. It has been in the news of a foreign academic recently having visa challenges. It is not an unusual tool in the story of freedom of expression. We know journalists around the world have also been denied visas.
Yeah.
Could you maybe take a minute or so to just give us maybe something specific about the case, if you can, if not generally, how visas are used against foreign academics, let's say in Thailand? Yeah.
Actually, there has been other attempts also in the last few years when, I think it's about 2 or 3 years ago, when some academics signed up a petition on democratic rule. And the foreign academics who signed that petition, they still get their visa, but whenever they leave the country or get into the country, they got put into a separate room and interrogated by the immigration officers and sometimes by the intelligence officer at the airport. So there have been many forms that try to use to control and limit especially the foreign academics, who they have to be more careful and Thai in terms of their possibility to stay in the country. And actually last night I saw another attack by another conservative group that against one of Mahidol foreign academics who support the student movement, and then they demand the university to revoke his visa. So I think this has been going on, and as you said, has been used to control the foreign academic in the country.
Yeah, thank you, Bencharat, for that insight. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Bencharat from Mahidol University. So let me now turn to the next speaker. The next speaker is our colleague Halambang Virat Raman from Airlangga University. He's today's representing, the Center of Human Rights Law Studies at the university, and also the Indonesian Caucus for Academic Freedom. Halambang, the floor is yours. Over to you. If you could kindly unmute, please proceed.
Thank you very much, James. I really appreciate with you and other colleagues organize this very important and fundamental for current situations, especially related to academic freedom. My points that I would like to share is academic freedom in Indonesia's declining democracy. The reality of academic freedom in the last 5 years, 2015 to 2020, shows that the attacks on campuses and academics have continued and even increased. Higher education policies are increasingly politicized by power, especially the regime, while the attacks on academics, including members of the university and its academic activities, are left without accountability. So it seems like impunity. For instance, like by wiretapping or intimidating academia or researchers, then there is no further accountability. And the most targeted issues are related to several issues. And if we look at in 2015 especially, it was related to communism stigma, because in the context of 50 years after 1965 massacres. Having that, actually many cases were influenced by the stigmatizations of communism, and therefore many discussions, seminars, workshop, even movie screening were banned or ended without accountability from university management as well as from the law enforcer. And such situations actually is it seems to me it's parallel to the context of repressive government in Indonesia 2 decades after or post Suharto's step down. Hence, the situation is generally reverts to a strengthening of authoritarian politics. If you might be aware that there are several scholars already named the situations of declining democracy during Jokowi's administrations. For instance, like Fedi Hadis telling us about the democratic setbacks, or Thomas Power from NU tells us about authoritarian turn and other names. And hence, actually, there are several issues also related to what I've seen the press freedom, academic freedom index, actually related, for instance, like the freedom to teach or to do research. Yeah. Under current science law, requires that all research considered dangerous, quote unquote, must be done with a permit issued by the central government after being declared, cleared by an ad hoc ethics academics or ethics committee. And the law further elaborates that research falling under this category are those that might threaten social harmony, quote unquote, and also national security. And hence, those who do not comply with these regulations actually can be in jail and fines up to approximately 140,000 US dollars. So that's really current situations under the science law. And I could not imagine if there is a research related to, for instance, like Papua issues, it will be easily considered as dangerous research. And also my colleagues, I could not name the university, the research team should be stop the research because of contravene to the state imposed them to stop, and they were required to go to Jakarta for attending the meeting with the military in order to get insights, and also they asked, I mean, the military asked them to stop. And this is related to the research related to the history. And it's surprisingly, while on the other side, the new Minister of Education, Nadiem Makarim, he introduced the Campus Merdeka or Freedom Campus idea, which seems to bring winds of change, yeah, to the world of higher education. However, actually, this did not touch the basic elements of academic freedom as a prerequisite for the development of higher education institutions. Therefore, I argue that in an anti-science power structure, science is only a political accessory. Meanwhile, intellectuals and even former pro-democratic activists in the political bureaucracy maneuver to defend themselves to the power by denying science. So this is also a new phenomenon in the context of Indonesia's declining democracy. As observed previously, academic freedom in post-authoritarian regimes in Indonesia actually is characterized by four primary challenges. The first one is the absence of legal protection, as well as meaningful discourses on academic freedom. Second, the acts of violence, including by threatening campuses with physical attacks and legal actions, for instance, like criminalizations, as well as filing the case or lawsuits, yeah, against the academia after, for instance, like providing expert witness before the court, and they got lawsuits with unproportionate fines. The third is also we have no academic tradition, but on the other hand, feudalism is still in the campus. Insularity and also disciplining freedom through over bureaucratization. So that's really making the campus could not freely discuss, for instance, like political opinion in order to criticize the government, for instance, because it would be considered as attacking the social structure in the campus itself. And the fourth, it's common in the world that the state-sponsored commercialization at higher education level also grows in Indonesia. Then how to deal with these attacks actually? First, we already established, or we set up a new Surabaya principles on academic freedom. It was drafted and also agreed 6 December 2017, supported by SIHAN, Southeast Asian Human Rights Studies Network, and also Sepaham Indonesia, Indonesian Lecturer Association for Human Rights, and also endorsed by SIHAN in Kota Kinabalu, Malaysia, 25 April 2018. Having these Surabaya principles, we could use this for tool of advocacy, defending students or academia, providing statements, or also bringing the case into negotiations with the university management. Secondly, we also established KICA, Indonesian Caucus for Academic Freedom. This organization is national and individual-based alliance for strengthening academic freedom in the country. And also having this organization, we have annual conference and meeting defending rights of academia, providing legal advice before the court, and also submitting legal opinion or amicus curiae, etc. And the third one, we also trying to push by adopting principles and academic freedom as fundamental rights and freedoms into national human rights commissions, norms and regulation standard for freedom of opinion and expressions. And fortunately, this is just agreed or approved by the commissioners in 5th April 2021. So just recently. And the last one, also we actively participating in solidarity for academic freedom in regional Southeast Asia. For instance, like bringing the message of solidarity for our college in Myanmar. And we also collaborate with change.org by setting up the solidarity or petitions, and in order to push the president in order to speak up about Myanmar. And finally, after receiving 10,000 supporters, then Jokowi actually spoke on Myanmar finally, and then it was really little successful in order to promote academic freedom as a value. So that's my things that I could share at the moment.
Thank you, Halambang, for your intervention on developments in Indonesia. So once again, let me make a transitional comment / question for you before I get into the next speaker. I take away that just like our colleague Bencharat, who was mentioning about civil society and society in general, attacking academia, academic freedom, through many places. What we get from you is the illustration of examples of state officials, attacking academic freedom and doing so with impunity, right? And I guess also coming over to Bencharat, that sense of impunity for that kind of conservative civil society elements are also there. So to you, Halambang, I want to ask, who else can support the protection of human rights, academic freedom in that regard? What is the role of the National Human Rights Institution of Indonesia here in relation to the range of infringements that you have just outlined, and also have in the Indonesian case, and I think this by extension also can be discussed for other countries. Has there been an input, for example, raising it to the attention at the UPR, at the Universal Periodic Review of the country? So just for your reaction, Halambang, over to you.
Yes, there are several supports, from first of all from civil society organizations, and even for instance, like Indonesian Legal Aid Foundation or EFDEA, they provide lawyers for us, and then it's really fantastic collaborations, because having them as a counterpart or collaborative institutions, we also it seems like strengthening our strategy in order to make sure that we will be defended by them, and also having this connection, also expanding the network and also awareness, public awareness on academic freedom. And interestingly, also the role of journalists. The KICA, for instance, after doing investigations and also bringing the message to the government policies, the support from journalists are really crucial and also very important to bring the message. And even because of their capacity, they could help us in doing investigations, for instance, like unraveling about the academic dishonesty. This is related to the integrity. For instance, like unraveling or trying to get information about plagiarism or honoris causa in sale and so on. And regarding the national human rights institutions, they also support us by, as I mentioned before, is adopted Surabaya principles on academic freedom, and also providing space for step by step bringing the academic freedom as important value for strengthening freedom of expressions in the country. And not only collaborative with them, but also we are also part of the strategic partner in order to, for instance, like if there is a case, we can report directly to them, and then quite providing space and also good response in order to defend academia. So that's the role of national human rights institutions, legal aid foundations, and also journalists. Regarding the UPR report, yes, I think several issues, for instance, like those academia who were attacked because of religious discrimination or targeting about the religious freedom. This is related to academic freedom. For instance, like expanding the teaching method, but it was academic from Banda Aceh was threatened and even subjected for killings. And we reported under UPR or any human rights mechanism at international forum in order to mention that this is also fundamental issues in our society. And hence, of course, we still see the importance collaboration with the human rights groups in the country.
Thank you very much, Lambang, for that added explanation. I will now turn to our next speaker, Mubashir Hassan. Mubashir Hassan is an adjunct fellow at the Humanitarian and Development Research Initiative at Western Sydney University, Australia. The floor is yours, Mubashir. Please.
Thank you very much, James. And it was an absolute learning experience to listen to our previous and my previous speakers. I thought before going into the core of the discussion today, and rather than just reporting the facts, which is already out there in various platforms, I will talk a bit about the context through which we're talking about. So, the depressing news that are coming out is reflective of the current global scenario. So I'll quote two reports. So for example, the Democracy Report 2021 of the Varieties of Democracy Index points out that autocracies are now homes of world's 68% population, while liberal democracies diminished over the past decade from 41 countries to 32. With a population share of only 14%. That is 14% of the world population enjoying liberal democracy. Still, there are challenges within that context. So this variety of democracy, which is also known as VDEM index, collects data on several indicators, and its database contains over 28.4 million data points. And the VDEM notes that the level of democracy enjoyed by the average global citizen in 2020 is down to the levels last found around 1990. And the Washington-based Freedom House in its latest report too observed that democracy's defenders sustained heavy new losses in their struggle against authoritarian foes. And the international balance has now shifted in favor of the tyranny. So we are talking organizing this panel within this context. You asked me to talk about South Asia, and I thought for 8 minutes, I don't know what I'm going to talk about because there's so much to talk about. But I thought rather than again reporting, I'll just put forward a point of view. And before moving into that, I just also wanted to quote a few status of media freedom, because it's kind of like connected, media freedom, academic freedom. So it's all both are kind of reflects the overall environment for freedom of expression. So India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh are now way behind Afghanistan in terms of media freedom. So Afghanistan is in between Afghanistan, I think, is at 122. India is at 142, I think, and Bangladesh is after 150, and Pakistan is later 140. So within that, I want to elaborate the point our first speaker touched upon, and that is the role of academia, the role of scholars and students as agents of coercive force in suppressing academic freedom in the universities. And I think this is happening all around Asia, but I would just put forward some of the key facts and points. And this is an evolving paper I'm writing with one of my German friend, Julian Carrig. He is now at a university in Belgium. So we argue that the existing misperception since the third wave of democratization, beginning in the mid-90s until the collapse of Soviet Union, both scholars and political commentators focused on student activism and the role of scholars as drivers of democratic transition. And among development practitioners, higher education is considered vital for expanding middle classes, which are all seen as a catch-all remedy to cure democratic deficits, mostly in the so-called global south, my area, and for countries to develop into stabilize as liberal democratic societies. Thus, universities have traditionally been conceptualized as spaces and institutions par excellence for pluralistic democratic societies to become realized. But if, as I've been telling you, that the overall scenario within the democratic culture is going backwards, so what role universities are playing there? Still, there are academics, there are scholars who are fighting for these spaces, but the point that so many scholars and also students are supporting autocracy is a problematic one. Because we argue that the narrative of students and scholars representing and advancing the role of democracy does not represent the full picture. And in articulating that, we deconstruct common and simplified narratives about higher education institutes and students as democratic stabilizers. So now let me come to South Asia. So last year in mid-July, during the highly infectious COVID-19 pandemic, police in Bangladesh's northern district, Rangpur, arrested a female faculty who is 28 years old. And she was not a criminal. She was a university lecturer at the Department of Bangla in Begum Rokeya University. And her crime was to mock a former health minister on Facebook, referring to a corruption allegation during his 2014 to 2019 tenure as health minister. Although she was quick to apologize and delete her one-line Facebook status, realizing it has offended the ruling party activists and faculties, her status screenshot continued to circulate on Facebook. What follows after that was a nightmare for her. A student leader of the ruling party's student wing and the university administration, the point that is run by the faculties as well, filed a case against her under the Digital Security Act, which is labeled by Amnesty International as draconian. Even I could be kind of tried in that. And that may put her in jail for 14 years, though he is now out. But she was arrested and sent to prison during a pandemic for writing that point of view. And many of her colleagues and faculties from other public universities have expressed support for the arrest. I don't know how, but I think this is a fact. This is an area that people and activists and defenders of academic freedom should look into. And which is interesting is that is tied with the image of the country. So the local police in the court said her post went viral and created negative reactions and undermined the image of the country. And but she's out, but she remains temporarily suspended. And the phenomena that is states using hegemonic power to maintain the image of the country through coercion, its network and its network support base of public universities is not unique to Bangladesh. The Free to Think 2020 report of scholars at risk found that in India, which is to be, and still many people argue, is the largest democracy, the ruling party enjoy widespread support within faculties and students in Indian universities. Consequently, scholars and students who attempt to protest are silenced by force or through disciplinary measures by their peers. And we saw that during the protest against controversial Citizen Amendment Act and students were attacked in Delhi University, Jamia Millia University, and Aligarh Muslim University by supporters of the regime, which many of were students and police. And the scholars at Risk Network recorded that through spring and summer of 2020, there were coordinated series of retaliatory action by the university administration and the state against protesting students. And a growing number of students and scholars were arrested and prosecuted under India's Unlawful Activities and Prevention Act, enacted by the Parliament in 1967. And in Pakistan, we know it's a known phenomena that university administrators and students tied with religious groups and government regularly attack higher education communities. The cases of Dr. Omar Ali Jan, who was fired from 3 Pakistani universities and facing sedition charges, organizing democratic protest, and Junaid Hafiz, a former lecturer at Bahauddin Zakaria University, who is held in solitary confinement since 2014 and facing death penalty for verbally insulting religion after being framed by students, are chilling examples of how higher education communities toward academic freedom. And on final note, I wanted to mention that there was a conference plan between Bangladeshi and Pakistani scholars recently, and it was looking into the history of 1971. And on the day before, the conference was cancelled because of pressure from unknown people or probably known people. So with this example and with this context, I want to end here with an open-ended question that how do we save universities as a space where we could still put forward dangerous question without fear of persecution and without fear of being sent in jail or forcefully disappeared? How do we manage the role of universities as a space for critical thinking and open discussion? Thank you.
Thank you, Mubashir, for your intervention. We take away your point about the rise of autocracy, around the world, and how that sort of impacts how a majority of students and scholars themselves within this institution of the university or higher education, who are also part of the problem in terms of attacking academic freedom. And also we take the point about some of this, depending on the country and context in South Asia, may also work hand in hand with religious groups. So I will, in the interest of time, I will not, ask you a transition question and simply move on to the next speaker. The next speaker is Charles Wu Chong Han. He's Associate Professor at the Department of Diplomacy at National Cheng Chi University, Taiwan. Charles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James, and everybody. I'm Charles. I'm very happy to be invited to this platform to talk about academic freedom. Since I'm not my major study democracy in East Asia, Southeast Asia, I just speak of a little bit my personal experience and also my ideas, opinions, as well as my friends and my colleagues who had pretty similar ideas on what is called academic freedom, and also what's the academic freedom situation in the Chinese society. Here I mentioned Chinese society, including Taiwan, and probably later on the professor from Hong Kong can mention about that, and also China. For Taiwan, I would say something that we enjoy pretty much a solid economic freedom so far, since the Taiwan governments, they abandoned the party and also newspaper ban early in 1987. And since then, the whole Taiwanese society started to experience a very wide open freedom on either speech religion, as well as the in academia. And so far, the university in Taiwan, we can say what we want to say in class, no matter touch on Taiwan issues, cross-relation issues, Xinjiang, Hong Kong issues. We are enjoying much of the freedom, associated publications and teaching, also the public opinions in social medias. That's one thing we need to appreciate. However, there's another debate, which people think is about academic freedom issues. However, I want to name it as kind of commercial/international competition, is whether Taiwanese university, they want to go with the path of international branding of universities. Right now, we know there's a huge competition in international universities, international higher educations, especially we are follow with the rankings in either QS or like American News. This is one thing the Taiwanese faculties, they are debate with. They think now we need to go with the international standard, which we need, whether we need to publish more SSCI, SCI, and in order to fit into the game of internationalizations, or they want to do their own freedom of teaching or research, which is write more in Chinese or write more in with local issues. And this debate is getting much stronger and stronger since all the top universities in Taiwan now, they want to get a higher rank in the QS, pretty similar like Singapore and Hong Kong universities. So the governments, they give a lot of money, they try to provide a lot of grants, requesting the faculties to do this kind of international branding games. But some faculty thinks this is way too much. They want to do what they want. For example, if you want to publish some local issues in Chinese, they probably cannot count as SSCI or SCI. They go with TSSCI, or even you publish with CSSCI, something like that. So that's why I say they probably can one of the issue of academic freedom in Taiwan so far. But like what I say, if we put it more seriously, it's go with more with the commercialism or more what we call the path debate. The second thing I want to mention a little bit is about the academic freedom in the Chinese society, which means not even in Taiwan, probably in another side of Taiwan, mainland China. I talked to several people, my faculties, my colleagues, and even my personal experience about the academic freedom in mainland China so far. And I want to into two major points. The academic freedom in individual level and also academic freedom in the school level. Okay, when the people or the faculties experience the lack of freedoms in their careers, academic careers, they will give a lot of pressure for them. Okay, they will face the situation which they cannot talk what they want to talk, they cannot teach what they want to teach. They are forced to change the syllabus in order to feed the academic, we call the political sensitivity issues or political correctness. And it's about teaching. And also you cannot teach freely because there are probably camera in the classroom. There are some people watching your teaching and you cannot say something you want or the topics you want to say. For the research, this is another issue. You probably cannot do certain kind of themes or topics which are too political sensitive. For example, you cannot do the topics on the cross-strait or Hong Kong or Xinjiang issues for your research. For individuals, they will face this kind of pressure, which will make them keep silent or do the school asks them to do. This will get very serious problems because faculties cannot have or create innovations under certain kind of situations. And for junior faculty or entry-level faculties, they want to maintain or keep their job, even get a salary to feed their families. So in order to do that, they will keep silent. Okay, and which I think that's not good for the academic developments for the entry level or junior faculties. This is for the individual level. Then for the school level, this will be another very serious issues because the school will try to, in order to maintain survive and in order to stay away from the problems, they will push the pressure to the faculties, especially the mid-levels of management. Some mid-level managements, they want to listen to their school authorities, so they will ask their faculties to listen to their orders, ask them to change the courses. Even they will change all the courses at the same time. They don't allow you to teach certain kind of topics, and then this is all kind of very, I can say, bizarre and tough situations. Also the promotions. If the society or the school experience some kind of lack of academic freedom, they will face the unfair promotion system, which they probably will say under certain kind of conditions or your publication, they don't count because they are too sensitive. Or they will let some people who do the topics which they like, they promote them, but they are totally unqualified, or they are totally, they publish in some predatory journals or those journals without any index. So this is one thing under the school levels, the whole system will be biased. The faculties, they will face a situation whether they want to stay or leave. Only those faculties who really listen to the order, they will stay and promote it. And this is one thing I think the pressure for the school levels. The last thing I want to say is the academic freedom is very important for all the scholars or the people who are doing in academia. If the whole situation or whole structure is under high pressure or under authoritarian regimes, the schools or institutions, they have to think about how to survive. This is one thing I want to say is the scholars, they will be very, very dangerous if they say something sensitive in international society. If they do like international exchange program or do this kind of webinar and they say something not very appropriate, they probably will get some punishments after they return back to their institutions. So like what I say, we need to maintain this kind of freedom for all the faculties in this area, in East Asia and Southeast Asia. However, this is also suffered impact by the, I can say, the country level or the states level. I don't know how to solve it. Probably, we need more publication or more academic works to talk about this. But thank you, James, to invite me to have this.
Thank you, Charles, for your insight first on how the push to international ranking in Taiwan is also indirectly giving cause for concerns around issues of academic freedom, and to your second point, your practical insights and observation on higher education and the dynamics of operating as a staff at Chinese universities. Charles and I, spent some time together in China, so I can validate what he said. I think the thing that Charles missed is really when we bring books from abroad for teaching into China, and the immigration authorities will, open up our bags and examine all the books and tell us some books are no good. But Charles, you left that out, but I'll let you go. I'll now turn to Professor, our next speaker, Professor Fu Ling from the University of Hong Kong. We look forward right now for your intervention. Over to you, Professor Fu.
Thank you for the invitation. I guess relatively or in comparison, Hong Kong has a quite robust academic freedom regime to date. It is facing uncertainties and some challenges. There are anxieties and concerns about the future of academic freedom in Hong Kong. So a little bit of background. So China passed a national security law for Hong Kong July 1st last year. So that national security law has been implemented in Hong Kong for the past many months. There are many things in the legislation, but the core issue is a number of criminal offenses that has been created, which are new to Hong Kong. There are concerns that those offenses would have adverse impact on academic freedom. Those offenses are the typical sedition, inciting secession, subverting government, advocacy of terrorism, and so on, so forth. So what I'm going to say is really what universities in Hong Kong have been trying to cope with this new national security system, at the same time to maintain the academic freedom. So the key issue is to maintain the same level of academic freedom so that it would not be eroded by the new law and the criminal offenses. So that's a starting point. I think the previous speakers mentioned the relevance of freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of thoughts, conscience, and then try to group academic freedom into it. To a degree, that of course is the right way of thinking about rights. There are a cluster of rights. They tend to rise or fall together. But then another, I think, equally important issue is each right has its own unique definition. They are different, right? So my concern here is how do we define academic freedom, right? My tentative view is academic freedom is different and is narrower than freedom of expression, right? For the simple reason that a student writing a term paper worried about what he should be writing or not writing is different from, say, a student manifesto calling for certain political change. There are, I think, intrinsic differences. In the same way, academics doing research in his office, say in the ivory tower, should be treated differently from, say, academics acting on streets, organizing activities. They are different. So in one sense, we all have the right of the freedom of expression, but then academic freedom would have a more limited scope. So I think as a starting point, we have to define what academic freedom is before we offer protection. I think for me, there are basically two elements. One is the ability to carry out academic research, teaching, and learning without fear. Right? So basically, defined in the scope of research, teaching, and learning, covering both faculty and students. Second, it has to do with university autonomy. That is, the university should be able to regulate and manage university affairs, including creating an environment for intellectual inquiries and academic excellency without unlawful or unreasonable interference from the outside. Those are, it seems to me, the two key components of academic freedom. So what are the practical concerns? Well, in the past few months, I think here are the two concerns. Right? One is whether some teaching materials should be removed. Right? Some books should be taken away from the library. Or some articles and writings should be taken out from the syllabus, which used to be there. Right? So that is one concern. Right? The starting point, of course, is nothing should be changed as far as teaching is concerned. Right? As far as the teaching and the research is concerned, nothing would be changed, nothing should be changed unless there are clear indication that the research and the teaching violates the law. Right, so that is, I think, it's the important point. So to reduce panic, to reduce anxieties and concerns among faculty member and students, so it has to be emphasized again and again that the past practice in terms of research and teaching remain unchanged. The second issue, I think, is important going forward. In order to maintain the same level of academic freedom that the university has been enjoying, the university should have the self-regulatory capacity. Right? The university should be able to have very constant, healthy conversation with faculties, with student organizations, and to reach a consensus, right, as to what is the steps to take. Right. At the same time, I think the university should send out a strong message, a very clear message to the outside world that the university is able to regulate, right? And it is able to engage students so as to maximize freedom, academic freedom, and to minimize intrusion into campus life. To do that, I think the university authority should be able to, in a position not only to talk with student bodies, to the faculties, but also engage the authorities, even the law enforcement agencies, so that both sides would have a very good understanding on where things are. Within the university, I think two things are important. Facing uncertainties about academic freedom, it is important to engage conversations, dialogue, right? To explain to the faculty members, to the students, what are the nature of the offenses, what are the elements of offenses. Most of people are not well informed about, for example, what is incitement to secession, what is seditious libel, right? Not properly informed people tend to be concerned. Some of the fears are unreasonable, but then there's the nature of fear. Fear is contagious. Fear is unreasonable. Sometimes fear could be irrational. So that being the case, I think a university would be in a position to explain to the community what is the limits of the law, right? And the next step, I think, the university should be taken is really set up a mechanism. I don't know whether there are studies, for example, in the universities, not only the global south, but also in the neighbor democracies, in their universities, whether there is a standing, say, mechanism, right? So that when a student, a faculty member feel that the academic freedom is under threat, right? Whether there's a person in the faculty, in the university, you can go to make a complaint, right? To ask for clarifications. I have seen lots of very abstract statement about what academic freedom is and how we should protect academic freedom. Nobody would have any doubt the value of a grand statement about the importance of academic freedom. So what is needed is not those statements in abstract. What is needed is something that is very concrete, right? Something that carries, provide a procedure, right, with particular remedies. So if a faculty member feel the freedom to carry out the research is challenging, right? So there is a mechanism to go to. So those are some of the concrete things that is in front of us that we've been dealing with, and I hope universities in different places will be able to share their experiences so that we could work together to enhance freedoms inside the universities. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fu, for your intervention. Professor Fu Hua Ling is Professor of Law and holder of Warren Chan Professorship in Human Rights and Responsibility at the Faculty of Law, Hong Kong, the University of Hong Kong. And he had reminded us, with the introduction of the national security law, the challenge here is whether Hong Kong can maintain some level or the same level of academic freedom. And he also, invited us to think through about the cluster of rights and to take note when we talk about academic freedom, we may want to define it so as to have a more robust conversations. He's also, given us some practical tips about how this can happen. So I will now next move to our discussant and also our co-convener, Karin Zachary. She's from the Center for East and Southeast Asian Studies and Scholars at Risk in Sweden, Lund University. Karin, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, James, and thank you to all the speakers who have come with valuable insights to the state of academic freedom in the broader Asian region. So just to introduce myself briefly, I hold a PhD in Human Rights Studies, and I am here today representing the Center for East and Southeast Asian Studies at Lund University, which is an interdisciplinary research and educational center offering courses on all levels. But I'm also representing the Scholars at Risk network at Lund University. The Scholars at Risk section in Sweden is part of a global network covering 42 countries that provide assistance and sanctuary to scholars and defends human rights for researchers around the world. Lund University has been a member of Scholars at Risk since 2014, and the Swedish section was launched in 2016. At the moment, Lund University is hosting 2 threatened scholars. Now, putting the question of academic freedom in a global perspective, I think what you all have been talking about today makes us realize that academic freedom is really not an academic issue at all. That the decline in rights and freedoms in general in a society also means a decline in rights and freedoms in academia. There are different aspects of academic freedom and political repression. And these demonstrate how interdependent and indivisible human rights are. So while international legal protection of academic freedom is good, the question is how rights and freedoms are implemented, and also that there has to be means to protect freedom, to research and teach. There has to be resources and support to uphold institutional autonomy and campus integrity. So there are in many countries, including these Asian countries, discrepancies between law and practice. Or as has been pointed out today, there can also be conflicts within the legal framework of a country, which raises questions not only about what are acceptable limits, on freedom of expression, but about the line drawn between unrestricted rights, like the freedom of thought and opinion, and non-absolute rights, such as the freedom of expression, which I think the last speaker here was pointing towards. There are particular events, direct attacks on academic freedom by the state, but also by civil society actors that can lead to the loss of your academic position, to arrest and prosecution, even imprisonment, but also covert violence. Additionally, we have been reminded about the existence of institutional restrictions and systematic intimidation, that these can also be expressed as state representatives intervening, the social structures at educational institutions, the university leadership not protecting campus integrity. Another challenge that we haven't addressed so much today, but that has been in the background, is the digital challenge. And with the opportunities that has come with digital learning and academic exchange, there is also raised awareness about interference with teaching, surveillance of opinion and expression. Something that can take place in classrooms. We heard example of cameras in classrooms, but we also have examples from Southeast Asia with military presence in classrooms. But after a year of global pandemic, I think this has become a concern for everyone who is engaged in higher education. And this surveillance, we have to be aware of, takes place outside of our campuses and in channels that, such as social media, are in a blurred area between private and public. So the student, just as us teachers and researchers, have that role in any digital space. So they are not just students when they are at campus, they are also students when they interact on social media, and they are surveilled just the same. And we have heard about these cases involving intimidation and attacks on students. And another issue that was raised that I want to highlight was how academic freedom could become a commercial advantage in international rankings of universities. Listening to the speakers today, I think many have been confirmed in their beliefs about the state of academic freedom in Asia. But I also want to say that there is glimmer of hope represented by the speakers here. And I think that we all welcome an increasingly broader public debate and awareness on these issues, which of this seminar, this webinar is a testimony to. And we have heard a little bit about what we can do as academics. Organizing academics to work with human rights groups, to monitor violation of rights and freedoms, and organizing solidarity work across the Asian region, not just globally, but locally, regionally as well. And academics truly have and can have a crucial role in, as one of the speakers, Ben Sharat, put it, have a crucial role in making undiscussable topics discussable. And I will not expand further. We have many questions coming in, and we are running a little bit out of time. So I would very much like to invite the questions that will be moderated by James, and give more time and space for our invited speakers. Thank you very much.
I will just, before the Q&A, just say we have a second poll. And I think these are some of the themes that have come up. Do you think the challenges to academia or academic freedom has had enough exposure compared to challenges to media and internet freedoms? So again, I'll repeat, do you think the challenges to academic freedom has had enough exposure compared to challenges to media and internet freedom. The poll is just going out there. Please let us have your thoughts. There are several questions that have come in. I'll just kick off with the first one for Bencharat. The question is, are there also personal attacks by conservative or royalist people through social media, targeted at progressive academics, please?
Yes, as I mentioned during my presentation, that the conservative group mobilized some social media and resources to identify the progressive academics and personally attack them. For example, they put our face on social media, individual faces, and say they and call for the university administration to take action on these progressive academics. So almost every day there will be something post up on the social media attacking individual academics who say something about democracy.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is to Halambang. Here, the question reads, for Indonesian scholars, is it possible to criticize Pancasila or the military?
Well, it's still possible, but it's risky. For instance, like in the current case that we also deal with, Mr. Panduryono, epidemiologist from University of Indonesia, found himself a target of cyber attack following his criticism towards the government for handling COVID-19 pandemic. His criticism actually related to when he criticized a joint venture between the research team from Erlangga University, that is from my university, in collaboration with the State Intelligence Agency and the Army in search of COVID-19 drugs. And finally, after criticizing, because according to him, he mentioned that the research did not meet the international standards, and then he got cyber attacks for his Twitter. In the context of Papua, of course, it's more dangerous. Papua student could not easily criticize the roles of military because it could be easily arrested and accused for treason, and even stigmatized by saying separatists, anti-Pancasila, 5 pillars, and criminalize them, although they just protest about the health facilities or educational things. And this is still quite quite risky in the context of Indonesia, since talking about Papua, of course, this is embedded racism politics, accusing student expressions as criminals.
Okay, thank you, Halambang. We have also just ended our poll, and 80% of you who voted, and that's over 40 something people, feel that academic freedom does not have enough exposure. And that has also been, something that has been an underlining comment that came out throughout this hour plus that we've been speaking about in terms of academic freedom. So really, in part, this webinar is also to try to, sort of move the needle on that deficit. A couple of comments, really. First one is just thank you to Professor Hu. The message reads, for his courage, Yawi, if you could just go back, for his courage to speak here despite chances he's being monitored by Chinese authorities. He does look a little bit nervous though. So maybe that's from one of your fans. So very appreciative of your thoughts and comments, and we are very happy you are here with us. Another comment from the Philippines. Hi, I'm writing from my experience in the Philippines context. I would like to ask what universities can do when the very lives of their faculty and students are threatened, when they voice anti-government opinions. Summary detention and torture, as well as extrajudicial killings, are real risks in some countries, and I will invite Professor Fu just to broadly maybe once again reiterate for our audience, what can universities do? You mentioned some of this, but just to kind of reinforce, to play their part to support the idea of academic freedom. Over to you, Prof.
Right. Well, for one thing, I don't think that the Chinese government is interested in monitoring what I have to say. I think the key thing is, right, the national security law in Hong Kong is new, right? The universities are not prepared to deal with it. Students in particular, in their 20s, they have never really experienced any type of authoritarian control. It is an alien concept. They could imagine what happens elsewhere. That probably would be what they've been told in the past. The bad things happen elsewhere. Now, the concerns, it may happen here at home in Hong Kong. Then what are you going to do? So psychologically, they're not prepared. Institutionally, we're not prepared. So in those circumstances, fear became so dominant, right? Students are concerned about the title of their papers, the essays, worried that it will have consequences, many years down the road. So I think the society, the government, the universities will have to do a lot to really put things into perspective, right? There are legal rules, there are criminal offenses that are very clear now. So students would have to be careful about that in terms of, say, secessionist speech and activities. But beyond that, Hong Kong could still maintain the robust academic freedom. But then we have to communicate with students on that. And then we talk about, say, the solidarities, right? The regional sort of agreement, collective actions. Those are wonderful things that have been on the table for many years. So I think certain action is needed. Asia is the only place where we don't have, say, a human rights commission, right? A pan-Asian sort of treaty bodies, for example, which is available elsewhere. So that is what is missing, and that is what we can do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fu. There was one question to Mubasha. How do you see the heterogeneity of Indian states with relation to the academic freedom? Also, how do you relate the role of civil society, students to be precise, in fighting for the rights of academic freedom in South Asia, for example? Now, Mubasha, had to move on to another meeting, so he has been anyway alert and has sent a written response. He says that this heterogeneity and contest and battle between those who support tyranny and those who support freedom are prevalent across all countries in South Asia. However, he says the problem is the state lost their neutrality and making those who defend freedom as some kind of outlaw. And as a result, it's pushing a lot of people to apply self-censorship, and that's something that we've heard also from Charles to mention. We still have a few minutes, so I'm going to just a few more comments and questions, and I'll read that up so that we can have a complete rounding up of the event. So once again, the ongoing digitalization of education provides opportunities and challenges. One challenge is the misinformation and spread of fake news in the name of freedom of expression. This could threaten intellectual discourse and as embraced in academic freedom. What's your take on this? Shall we treat it as just another perspective under diversity of opinions, or shall we counter such in pursuit of the truth? To the latter may be interpreted as monopolizing knowledge. Thank you. Now, I would like to pass this question to Charles. Charles, I'll just reframe that question in this way. Sitting in Taiwan, where there's a lot of concern about disinformation from China, should we be concerned? Does that have any impact on Taiwan in terms of academic institution, in terms of what you teach or what you research? Are you always kind of on the lookout for this cross-strait disinformation? Over to you, Charles.
Okay, this kind of fake news, fake information, or the what we call the website attacks from the CrossFit, it's not it's common, and also it started very earlier, especially during our for example presidential campaign and also elections, all elections, and as you know, the internet getting more and more popular among young people. They pay more attention to these issues. Junior faculties, no matter where they got their PhD from Europe, from United States, or local PhDs, they are doing kind of research about the fake news, how strong the fake news, and what kind of impacts they create to our society, especially on the public opinions. For academia, I would say that things like I believe the higher education in Taiwan, we have a certain kind of level of the qualities, especially the faculties who are teaching in Taiwan. The material we're using, or the textbook, articles, theories we are also teaching to students, they already been studied, or they have certain kind of level of professions. Okay. Especially when we teach, we don't use online this kind of materials, which did not have any kind of evidence, or we don't use any kind of very, very superficial online public opinions for the school teaching. I think this is what the faculty, as being a faculty in Taiwan, and also I talk to my colleagues, we are very careful about the correct information when we have and what we teach. So I would say the fake news, they create some impacts. However, to the higher education in Taiwan, so far we are not suffering from these issues. But I want to say that one thing is, for the public opinions, especially from the news, online videos, or this kind of we call the instant news broadcastings, we need to be very careful, because the fake news and also the attacks from not only from China, from other parts of the world, they are real and they are serious. And I think they are. It's not only for Taiwan. I think all the countries in East Asia, we are also should be cautious on this kind of issues too. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I have a final question, and I'm going to direct this to Karin. The question is as formulated as follows from our chat box. Academic freedom in third world societies may be different from academic freedom in first world societies, or academic freedom in Asian societies may be different from academic freedom in Western society. Could you just respond to this opinion? Over to you, Karin.
Thank you. I mean, this is a challenging opinion or challenging question, an issue raised. And of course, when we talk about academic freedom, we have to be aware that we're talking about a set of freedoms and a set of principles that needs to be in place in order to protect and also know what we are protecting with academic freedom. And this is the freedom to think, to research, to teach, And then, of course, we have restrictions in all societies. All states do have restrictions, and most rights and most freedoms also have certain restrictions. And then what can be discussed is, of course, where should that line be drawn? What is allowed to say and not allowed to say in a particular context? I mean, are we allowed to threaten others with our research? No. Are we allowed should we be allowed to make racist remarks? No should be a universal answer. And of course, it is really important that academics can discuss also the political situation and the political context of where they are working and on which they depend for their research and teaching. So I don't think that you can answer it generally and say that there are any differences based on region in the world. But then we can definitely say that there are differences in resources to protect and implement academic freedom in different regions in the world. Thank you. I hope that was an answer.
Thank you, Karen. I mean, you certainly touched on the issue of, universality and values. And I think that will leave, our colleagues and all participants with food for thought. I'm now going to wrap up the session in 1 minute. I ask you to look at your chat box. We have sent you a link for a survey. As you look at the survey, let me also now highlight once again the 2 upcoming activities that Asia Center will be having. One is celebrating journalism, reporting without fear. We spoke about press freedom as part of embedded within freedom of expression. That's happening 2 p.m. Bangkok time, 4th May. All are welcome. And later in the year, 8 to 10 September, Asia Center together with the NIDA, National Institute for Development Administration here in Bangkok, and other partners are co-convening a conference on the impact of COVID-19 on a broad range of issues, including freedom of expression, communication, nationalism, and technology. If you'd like to partner or present a panel, please get in touch with us. Here is the QR code for the feedback. It'll take you less than a minute to give you feedback. So I want to once again thank everyone, our partners, the Center for East and Southeast Asian Studies at Lund University, Scholars at Risk, EFDEA, our regional partner for civil society empowerment, and Taiwan Foundation for Democracy. All speakers, Bencharat, Lambang, Charles, Mubasha, Professor Fu, and as well as Karin for leading the discussion. And I will now ask the team here to zoom out so you can also see all the other people behind the scene. Yawi, if you can zoom out. Yeah, and that's the tech support. So give them also a round of applause for bringing this show to you. So from all of us here and all of you out there, thank you very much. Goodbye, good afternoon, and see you again.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.